Travelers of Reddit, what's the worst scenario you found yourself in? I was in Guangzhou, China at a trade fair, and at the end of the day I was so tired, plus I was jet lagged and just wanted to go to my hotel room and sleep. There was a line for the taxis. Think of Disney attraction lines, like velvet ropes that zigzagged through a hall, and there were like 200 people in line. I was like, fuck, I don't wanna stand in line for an hour, so I walked toward the metro station. It was like a 45 minutes metro ride to my hotel, and then some guy walks beside me, looks both ways and says to me, private taxi, and I was like, yes please. Guy told me wait here, took my briefcase and left, and came back in a brand new Honda Accord. I hop in the back and off we go. Like 3 blocks from there we stopped at a red light, and suddenly some guy opens the passenger door, jumps in, and takes the key off the ignition. Another guy opens the driver's door, grabs this dude by the shirt collar, drags him out of the car, throws him on the ground, and the first guy, the guy with the key, goes around and turns on the car, locks the doors, and drives away with me in the back. I was 1000% sure I was being kidnapped. In China of all places. I was like, frick, now what? My heart was at like 250 BPM. We drove in silence for like 5 minutes and it felt like an hour. Then we turns at a dead-end street, pulls over, turns around, looks at me, reaches for his pocket, and whips out a badge. He was an undercover policeman, and there was a sting to catch illegal taxis, which ironically often kidnapped tourists. Dude takes out a video camera and makes me tell him how everything went down, how much I paid him, etc. So in some courtroom in China there was a video of me testifying against some dude that probably went to jail thanks to me. The policeman then went to the street, waved at a taxi with his badge out, and put me in the cab and told me never to take anything other than the cars that were painted like this. This was before Uber was around. It was scary, but thankfully nothing bad happened. Holy crap man, that's some lucky crap. Your kidnappers got kidnapped by legal kidnappers. Wife and I dined out at a remote town in Italy. Wife decided to take a shortcut out of parking lot and ended up in a ditch. The only chef and waiter came out to help. Chef ended up twisting ankle badly. Waiter brought his car and tied a rope to mine to pull it out. His bumper ripped off. All the while we were communicating through gestures because I didn't speak Italian and they English. It's amazing you became fluent in Italian so quickly. I was in Berlin when it was a divided city. To go from West Berlin to East Berlin, I, as a US citizen, went through Checkpoint Charlie. Some friends and I were meeting in East Berlin for dinner one night. We were traveling separately. The thing to realize is that once you were on East Berlin soil, you were on your own. If there were any problems, I was told to seek help from the Russian occupiers. The Cold War was still real, so this was just surreal. We were to have limited to no contact with the East German military or police. So, I get through a checkpoint Charlie and walk into East German soil. I stopped at their checkpoint. It was like a little horse stall where you stood and had the easy German military look at your passport. I handed it over. He looked at it, said something in German. I said I didn't speak German. He began accusing me of being a spy. I was escorted out of the stall and into a very plain holding room with a bench running the length of the room. That's all that was there. I remained standing. It was January and really cold. I wondered what my friends would do when I didn't show up as planned. About 30 minutes later, 2 soldiers came into the room, handed me my passport, and let me go. I drank a lot that night. When I was about 10, I was at a rundown French train station in the middle of nowhere, and I had to take a crap like nobody's business. So I go to the restroom and find out that there's no toilets, just holes in the ground. Apparently, the process for crapping in a hole in the ground is you pee first, and then poop. But being the champion that I am, I decided to go for both at the same time. Ended up peeing directly into my pulled down pants and then had to sit in my own pee for a 3-hour train ride back home. I'm uncomfortable. Delete this memory. I was an hour into a 9-hour international flight. I started feeling ill and went to the lavatory. I sat in the toilet with the lid down and leaned against the sink, splashing some water in my face. Next thing I knew, everything faded out. I woke up crumpled on the floor and completely disoriented. It took me a moment to get uncontorted and to get up. I was dizzy and shivering. I looked down and I had vomited all over myself. In addition, I peed and soiled myself. Good times. You hit the trifecta. My drink was spiked in Prague. Came to 2 hours later, walking down a road on the edge of the city. Got back to my hostel a further 2 hours later, because I had no idea where I was. Still had my money, phone, keys, so it makes me think the drink was for someone else. Well, at the least, you saved someone. We once traveled to visit friends in Camden, New Jersey, who had their first apartment in the downtown area. When it was time to drive home, we found that the wheels had been removed from our car and the vehicle was sitting on blocks. Thankfully, they left the interior alone. Camden, New Jersey, that was your mistake. Tuzla, Bosnia, 2010. My buddy and I stopped at a restaurant near the downtown center for lunch. It's quiet and the owner took our order. While the food was being prepared, a Roma woman approached our table. She stood and slowly curled out her hand, begging for money. If you travel in the Balkans, you get used to this. The best action is to do nothing. Say nothing. Wait for them to give up and leave. But this woman was persistent. She stood there like a statue with her palm extended as my buddy and I tried chatting in English about other things. Then, they started gathering. Her Roma troop started appearing across from us, taking up seats on a far wall and slowly collecting like crows on a telephone line. The Roma woman stood stock still with palm extended. Another waiter came to our table. He saw the situation and ran inside to get the owner. The owner, a middle-aged Bosniak fella, came outside. When he saw the situation, he started calling out in Bosnian. I don't know what he said, but I think it was the Bosnian equivalent of Avengers Assemble, because as he called out, windows opened in apartments around the square. Middle-aged men stuck their heads out to hear the alert. Then they came running. In under a minute, a group of Bosniak men assembled near our table. There was a lot of shouting and finger pointing toward the Roma. It was getting heated. The Roma answered back, but I could see their determination waning. The Bosniak men held firm. Just before things got really ugly, the Roma woman walked off. Her troop then peeled away and melted into the town square. The Bosniak men smiled with success and sat down at tables. The owner went in and came back out with free drinks for everybody. Sorry for trouble. All good now, he told us. We all had drinks and some laughs. But for a minute there I thought these guys, likely war veterans, were going to get really ugly with those Roma. That's really cool that they all stood up for you. Good people. My brothers and I were with our dad, driving down the Baja California peninsula to his house in Loreto, BCS. Dad and little bro speak no Spanish. Twin bro and I could usually bumble through ordering food. We had just stopped for lunch. Dad, not understanding the menu, jerked his thumb at the table behind us and said, "I'll have what they're having." The table behind us found this hilarious. They were laughing and yelling and one of them actually had to go outside so he could regain his composure. Little bro started crying because they were making fun of us. Everyone ordered and ate, and we got back on the road. As we were driving through the desert, the car started acting funny. It was smoking and running rough. About 30 minutes later, the oil light came on and the smoke got heavier. About 30 minutes after that, now completely in the middle of nowhere, the engine seized up and the car died. RIP our car. So we were out in the middle of the desert, in 100+ degree weather, with the broken car and no cell phones, because 1990s Mexico, and no emergency call boxes. We had enough water for each of us to fill up a red Solo cup. We had no snacks. Little bro had eaten them all because he didn't like Mexican food. We were out there for about an hour. We saw nobody. Nobody human. Anyway, vultures were circling overhead. Twin bro thought this was hilarious. Little bro was terrified. And I was just trying to keep everyone's crap together. A semi-truck drove past us. It pulled over, stopped, reversed, and then the two guys who were laughing at us at the restaurant hopped out. "Hey gringos, you car broke." Twin bro explained that yes, our car is dead. We're attempting to go to Loreto, but really anywhere with food and water and shelter would be acceptable. Since they were going to La Paz, we were right on the way. We spent the last 6 hours or so of the trip riding in the cab of a semi, everyone all squished together, listening to the same Creedence Clearwater Revival cassette tape over and over because he's an Ingalls. TL. DR. Car irreparably died on a road trip down Baja, in the middle of the desert on a 100-degree day. We were rescued by ridiculous truckers. We were crossing the border from Malaysia to Thailand over a bridge. As we were making our way across no man's land, this local looking guy ran out of nowhere in his underpants chased by 2 guys. He got to the Malaysian side and a soldier put his hand up to say he couldn't go through. He did a U-turn, dodged the 2 guys chasing him and ran to the Thai side. Again, a soldier put up his hand to stop him. He did another U-turn, dodged the guys, tried to jump on a scooter, but as he was taking off, they pulled him off the scooter. He got away from them again, but was stuck on the bridge with no way out. We got to the Thai side, checked into Thailand, and to this day, still wonder how the heck he ended up almost naked, in no man's land, with 2 pee-off guys after him. Logic tells me he probably lost the clothes and passport after getting to national limbo. Got stuck in Sydney, gigantic cluster of a day. Took the rail to the airport 3 hours early to go back to US. Went to check in and realized my passport was back in the hotel. In attempt to still make flight, took a luxury cab back to hotel. Got it, and sped back. Expensive. Got back to airport, ran in, but still missed flight. Went to reschedule, reorder tickets for next available. Realized my wallet was missing. No cash. Ran back to cab, but was already gone. Tried to call company, but my world phone was running out of minutes and charge, with no credit cards or cash to recharge. It was my birthday. Ultimately was able to reach my wife, who arranged a stay at nearby hostel and rescheduled flight the next day. Cabbie ended up showing back up at the airport much later that day, and I asked if I could search cab. I ended up finding wallet in between the seat cushions. Crazy day. The most ridiculous thing about this story is that you actually got your wallet back. Won a trip to the US when I was 17. A tour around Cali, Grand Canyon, Hoover Dam and some other places. On the last night the other peeps in the tour went out drinking and I couldn't go because of local alcohol laws. I had a hotel room in a not so great part of SF. No idea where exactly. I went out for a walk by myself and got lost. This was 96, so no smartphones. After some wandering I noticed the buildings looked even shabbier than in the street my hotel was at, and more people were on the street. These guys all looked like gang members. I'm a whitish guy from a suburban area in the Netherlands, and I was 17, and the LA riots were not long before that. Please forgive my stereotyping. I then saw the classic movie style group of beggars thugs huddling around a burning vat. I thought it strange because it wasn't cold at all, looking and pointing at me, and I figured my life was over. So one of those guys approached me and asked for a cigarette. I gave him one and he was very thankful. Next thing I know I was being interviewed by 5 or 6 very smelly men, wanting to know everything about my country, specifically how we deal with poverty and racism. They were very pleasant and funny. 2 of them walked me back to my hotel, saying it wasn't safe for white people to be out here at this time. I gave them a few more cigarettes and the last few dollars I had on me as a thank you. One of them wrote down his address and told me to write, but I lost that piece of paper. Sounds like a nice experience, actually. My family and I took a 16-day trip across Europe a few years ago. We were supposed to get on the 11 AM train to Paris from Munich that morning, but we all had gotten up early and decided to take the 9 AM train instead. Found out later there was an incident with an armed gunman on the train we were initially planning on taking. When I was 18 I went traveling around Europe by myself. One of the things I wanted to do was visit the beaches at Normandy, and because I love Band of Brothers I decided to stay in Corentin. While I was there I got a train bus to the American Military Cemetery and spent a few hours there and at Omaha Beach, and then went back to catch my bus. I somehow however managed to miss the last bus by about 10 minutes, and with it being a Sunday everything was closed early. So I was stuck in Normandy 20ish miles from my B&B. My phone battery was nearly dead, and so I had to make a decision between trying to find an English speaking taxi firm or to use it for maps. My stupid 18-year-old self decided it'd be better to walk it. 6 hours and a few sketchy looking French villages later I got back to my room and stuck my mouth under the tap in my bathroom, because to top it all off I had no food or water with me at the time. Got the real Band of Brothers experience at least. 13-hour flight from Abu Dhabi to Sydney. I was 16 and it was the first trip I'd ever taken on a plane by myself. I'd managed the first leg of the journey, Manchester to Abu Dhabi, fine. There were no delays. Everything was running smoothly. I had a bit of a tummy ache but it settled down in the 3 hours I was in Abu Dhabi. Get on the plane. Settle into the fact that I'm going to be in a tin can for 13 hours. Everything's great. Then about an hour into the flight I start feeling terribly sick. Like that oh frick I'm going to vomit and crap myself at the same time type of sick. I must have been up and down to the bathroom every half an hour. Thank God I was in an aisle seat. By the time we flew over Jakarta I didn't have anything left in my stomach to throw up, and I was just crapping out water. So there I am, feeling utterly drained. But it's okay because we'll finally be landing soon. Except, so Sydney airport has a curfew, and no flights were allowed to land before 6 AM. We were due in at 6:05, but with the sheer amount of planes wanting to land, we had to circle in the air for another 45 minutes. All this time the seatbelt sign was on, so I couldn't get up and resume crapping water. By the time I got off the plane and through immigration, I was shaking, sweating profusely and a lovely green tinge had replaced my normal skin tone. I was so scared that they weren't going to let me into the country because honestly, I looked vile. But they did, and the first thing I did in Australia was find a toilet and promptly evacuate both ends. Then I weakly limped to the baggage carousel, got my luggage and met my friend at arrivals. We went to his grand's house in a Sydney suburb so I could sleep off the flight, and when I woke up I felt a bit more normal and hungry for the first time in what felt like years. So we decided to get breakfast. Big mistake. My digestive system flipped out again, and I spent the 3-hour drive to Canberra constantly dreading potential accidents. In the end I didn't eat anything more that day, slept it off, ate plain boiled rice for breakfast the next day and everything was fine. However, to this day I have no idea what caused the illness. As I said, I was fine on the flight to Abu Dhabi, and nobody else got sick on the flight to Sydney so it was unlikely to be food poisoning. I'm just so glad that I was going to visit a friend, rather than being on my own when I arrived. A close second has to be when I was in Provincetown, MA and my hostel turned out to be a bunch of sheds with no heating or electricity. I found a dead mouse in the loo one night and in a panic flushed it down the toilet. RIP. Remy. Honestly it sounds like fecal contamination. It will give you the shoots like nothing else. Could have been as simple as someone having it on their hand and transferring it to a door etc and you picked it up. It is violent and sudden and usually lasts for 1-3 days. You got the crap shoots. I had my wallet ID stolen in Ireland while roughly 5 hours away from where all my other stuff was. By the time I was able to get back to my hotel and cancel my cards, the thief had already spent $1,200. I was near Oxford Circus in London on Black Friday last year, waiting out the front of a shop for my friend when people started running out of the underground screaming and shouting. Next second police cars come flying onto the scene. I ran back into the shop where my friend was. The security closed and locked the doors but we could still hear a lot of screaming and shouting. I was standing off to the side when someone comes running down Oxford Street shouting "Get down! Stay down!" At this point in time no one has any idea what's going on and I think everyone assumes the worst, that it's a terrorist attack on the busiest shopping street in the UK on an incredibly busy days. I hid under a clothing rack for what seemed like an eternity, just waiting. After what was realistically about 5 minutes, I and everyone else in the shop emerged and moved to the back of the store. It turned out to be a fight in the underground that triggered an alarm but having absolutely no idea what was happening and just sitting was terrifying. We were just standing at the back of the store on Twitter trying to find out if it was an attack or just any slither of information so we knew something. High on adrenaline, my friend and I then went to Primark, bought cheap pajamas and saw an American in Paris at the theatre next door. My father and I were backpacking around Australia signing up for various work exchange programs to travel on the cheap. One ended up going sideways and the lady who was hosting us came home drunk and angry. She started to get in a confrontation with my dad while swinging a foot-long meat cleaver. Things got so heated that we both started backing away to the front door, which was locked, so I donkey kicked the thing open. We ran down the stairs, grabbed our backpacks which thankfully were not unpacked, and we ran out to the street. Unfortunately this lady lived 30 minutes from everything including neighbors, and it was about 1130 at night. My dad ended up hiking to an area with more people and hitched a ride to the nearest town. I feel bad about kicking the door, but my hands were full with trying to grab our personal items off the table as we were quickly backing up. Don't feel 1 ounce of bad. Hired a crappy Peugeot 504. Got bogged on a salt pan in Kenya and charged by a super pee-off rhino. Also went kayaking in the Zambezi River and got harassed by dang hippos. Then fell into water infested with bilharzia, some creepy gross disease. Hippos are no joke. I lived on the Niger River for some time and everyone simply leaves the hippos alone cause they can kill you badly. Ending up homeless for several days in Memphis, Tennessee. I was in a touring band, and the hotel had double booked our room, and we were the ones who got shafted because we showed up later. Our drummer called around to every hotel within an hour, not a single room open. There wasn't enough room to sleep in the van, so we drew straws. Me and drummer ended up sleeping in sleeping bags behind an abandoned factory. We parked the van close to a dumpster, flipped the lids over and rested them on the roof of the van, and we had our little hut. It was extremely weird living like a homeless person while playing 2 shows at the Memphis Hard Rock back to back. Eventually, we got smart and bought a tent, and after the Beale Saint shows were over, we moved on to an area that had a campground, which became our base of operations for a week. Can't beat $18 a night. Not much, but I have to. 1. In Venice with my wife, out drinking with friends. There is minimal nightlife in Venice that we knew of. We were at some jazz bar that seemed to be the only place open that late. Walked a group of drunk girls around for an hour trying to find their lost friend. Got them back to the hotel and started walking back with another couple. It's about 3 AM at this point. Started getting followed by a group of people. The streets are literally empty on that part of town except for us. We tried shaking multiple times but they kept following. Finally broke into a full run and lost them when we hit an area with a bit more foot traffic. 2. Traveling home from doctor with my wife. Got to gate. Gate agent asks me to go back to security as they missed that I was one of the people that should have been randomly checked. Left my wife at gate thinking no big deal. Get hand swabbed at security. Machine prints out the results. Get a look. She waves someone over to look. They wave someone else over. This someone else is a rifle-toting military-looking guy who doesn't look very friendly. They ask me to come into a security room. At this point I'm a bit nervous, but no big deal. I hadn't done anything wrong. But flight leaving soon and wife is the nervous type. They tell me they found traces of C on my hands. They need to pull my luggage to look through it. At this point the imagination starts. Did someone put something in my luggage? Did the cigars I brought home have something in them? Frick, I'm going to get stuck in a Dominican jail. Luggage arrives. Full inspection. Thankfully nothing. Allowed to leave and get to gate just in time as they actually held the flight for us. Wife borderline panic. Get to Atlanta for my second flight. Get pulled again. I tell the agent the doctor story. She just laughs and said the numbers they recorded could have come from just touching a bill that someone snorted coke out of, was such a low amount. Was leaving the Forbidden City in Beijing with my Chinese buddy. Right outside there's a ton of touts trying to sell us jade dragons and other worthless crap. We ignore them and try making our way to the street. My buddy bumps into this tout and the tout says something to him. All of a sudden my buddy starts flipping out, yelling and screaming, shaking his fists at the tout. They start pushing each other and a crowd forms to watch. All of a sudden I see like 10 rough looking Chinese guys materialize. They're balling up. I see brass knuckles on one of them. I don't mind a good fight, but I don't want to see what the medical care inside a Chinese jail is like either. I grab my buddy by the shoulder and start pulling him away from the tout. He's still screaming. We eventually get to the street and he gets out his phone to call a cab. My buddy says that the tout called him the white man's dog or something to that effect. I ask him how long the taxi will be and he says no, I'm just calling my friends. We're gonna come back and frick those guys up later. Probably will get buried, but years ago my brothers and I decided to go backpacking through Europe. We ended up meeting a couple and 2 girls that shared a similar itinerary as us, and since we all got along well we decided to travel together. Fast forward, we are in Paris and we are out partying late one night and about 1:30 am we decide to call it a night. The place we were all staying was way on the outskirts of Paris. but not far from a metro line. Well, we go to the subway only to find out that we just missed the last train of the night. So we figure we would just grab a taxi. This was long before Uber. Well, that was a lot easier said than done. After a while we were finally able to get one guy to stop, and we told the girls to go on ahead and us guys would walk back. A few minutes after they left, this sketchy looking guy comes up and asks in very broken English if we were looking for a cab. We said yes, and he said he got us covered. Now we were thinking it was a cab driver who heard us and had his cab parked down the street. It wasn't. The guy had this beat up old Citroen and he said he'll give us a ride. Now the older wiser me would never have gone in that car, but we were tired and not looking forward for a long walk, and there were 4 of us and 1 of him, so we thought it was fine. So when we get and tell him our address and he takes off going down alleys until we are so turned around I had no idea where we were. But what happened next is what really rang the alarm bells. He gets on his phone and starts rapidly talking in another language. It definitely wasn't English or French, both of which I speak. A couple of minutes later another car with 4 guys pull up next to us and the guys start talking and then both cars take off again. Now I'm starting to freak out. I'm thinking that they are going to take us to some out of the way place and rob us or worse. I'm trying to hint to my brothers that the second the car stops we have to jump for it. We shoot out of one alley and lo and behold we are right outside our address. He lets us out, and when I tried to offer him money he just smiled and said it was his pleasure, and both cars then sped off into the night. The guy was just a good Samaritan who called his buddies to help him because he didn't know where we were and he didn't have GPS. You'll never take US alive. Oh, we're here. Well, we're in rural Ethiopia. Our friends, American missionaries, were driving us back to Addis Ababa for our flight home. In Ethiopia, pedestrians walk in the roadway because there are no parallel paths. We approached an old man walking away from us on the other side of the road. The driver honked, as is customary, but instead of moving to the left, out of harm's way, he hurried across the center of the road and into the path of our car. The driver swerved, taking the car as far to the right as possible without putting the right wheels in the ditch. But we still hit the poor guy, more of a glancing blow than a direct hit. Our friends, doctors who speak Amharic, hurried out to check on the guy. A crowd quickly formed. It was bizarre. It seemed like deserted countryside, but all of a sudden there were 30 very pissed-off locals surrounding us. Fortunately, the police eventually came, which kept a lid on it. But it was me, my wife, our son, and our friends' young children in one ancient Land Rover, windows rolled up, surrounded by people trying to open the doors and drag us out. The guy we hit was blind. He later died of his injuries. In regards to the crowd, my Polish Ministry of Foreign Affairs states in almost every travel advisory for Africa that in case of an accident you should rush to a police station due to the risk of lynching. It's not there as a joke. My friend, who had most of my papers, and I got separated when we landed in New York and spent hours in the airport looking for each other. My husband and I took a 2-month road trip throughout Italy, France, Switzerland, and Germany for our honeymoon, a trip made possible by a Garmin GPS. Somewhere in a gorgeous little town in the Loire Valley, France, GPS tells us to turn down road. We do, but immediately it looks weird, tree encroaching very close to our little Fiat, and a very tiny asphalt road that gives way to dirt. I voice my concerns and tell him to back up because there was no turning around. He says we are fine, and continues. A few seconds later the road narrows further, and crumbles into the river. Thank God he was paying attention. We back up, and circle around to find our way via another route. On the parallel street, we end up seeing the terminal end of road, which is actually a pedestrian walking path with steps at the end. For most people, this wouldn't be so scary, but my husband is one determined sucker and I thought he was going to cowboy that crap. Took a train from Sofia to Istanbul that was supposed to arrive 6 AM. It actually arrived around 4 AM. How? I've never had a train be that early. So I was one of maybe 3 people getting off this train, and my friend in town wasn't awake to meet me at the designated Starbucks, so I figured, hey whatever, I'll go hang out at Starbucks and relax. Nope, it's closed. So, now I'm wandering around Karakoy in the middle of the night with my trekking backpack. It's February so I have a scarf and hood up, And on top of that, I generally don't look friendly. I am very tall with a huge beard and long hair. I eventually notice a few people following me, and so I duck into a short alleyway to try and lose them. As I come to the end of the alleyway and try to turn out of it, I'm confronted by two balaclava-clad men with AK-47s and one other man with a huge pistol. The people behind me have closed the gap. I'm trapped. The man with the huge pistol starts yelling at me in Turkish, and when I say I speak English, gives a chuckle and says in the scariest tone ever, "This is not a good place for you right now." I almost pee myself. They proceed to take my backpack off of me, put me against the wall, and search everything. They scattered all my clothes around looking for stuff and generally made my backpack, which I organize very thoroughly, a mess. The worst part was the big pistol guy patting me down. I wear a hidden money belt, and when he got to the belt, he patted it once and quickly stepped back and yelled at me to get on the ground. Obviously thought it was something nefarious. I almost pee myself again. They lifted my shirt and searched the money belt. And then, all of a sudden, the main dude said, "Okay, now go," and they stood over me while I stuffed my clothes back into my backpack and basically ran away. I sat on the stoop of the Starbucks until it opened. I loved Istanbul more than any other city I've ever been to, but holy frick, that's an unpleasant memory. Blew a tire 400 miles from home at 10 PM with not enough cash to get a local hotel room. Since this was southern Utah, we had to hope that a tire shop would be open on a Sunday. We ended up sleeping in our car in a parking lot with our twins. I was on the east coast of Australia, broke as heck, sleeping in a tent in a trailer park on the edge of a small farming community. I met a German guy at the trailer park, and we teamed up and found a job picking tomatoes in a field with hard-working people from Nepal who were almost definitely illegals. The work was grueling, and we made next to no money because it was piecework, and we just weren't that good at it. The Nepalese workers absolutely killed it though, and filled multiple buckets in the amount of time it took us to fill one. We quickly found legal jobs through a work hostel, and it paid per hour, and were even able to move out of the trailer park. We worked the legal job for a few days, and early one morning on payday, we went to the tomato picking farm to collect our pay for the 2 days of labor we put in. I got my $30 or so dollars, but my German friend got handed an envelope with about $1,000. He was given the pay of one of the hard-working illegals. I found out about it when we were driving back, and he was just ecstatic, because he was also completely broke. We got back to the hostel, and we found we had been followed by the owner of the farm, who demanded the money back. My German friend claimed that he didn't get any extra money, and the farm owner told him that he was going to be coming back with some guys to get things settled. The threat was heavily implied. As soon as the farm owner left, my German friend took that as his cue to get out of town, and was on the road in 20 minutes. I stayed at the hostel, even though they knew where I was living, because I was still broke, without a vehicle, and if I left, I would also be without a job. For a couple of weeks I was looking over my shoulder for a bunch of Australian farmers to rough me up, but I did not see them again. In retrospect, I felt terrible for the random Nepalese farm worker who had his pay stolen, but at the time the shock of the money, followed by the threats, kept me from thinking about it too deeply. TLDR, I was an accessory to an unintentional theft from an illegal migrant worker, and was threatened by a farmer. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.